Okay, let's try this again. Can you hear us online and is it coming through
We can
okay?
we can hear you well, Linda.
It was a YouTube.
Okay, all right, well, let's try this again. Welcome, everybody. Gonna convene the meeting here in March. We selected Zach Fried as the chair. Zach was unable to make it today. Richard Smith agreed to be the co-chair, so Richard, up to you.
All right, well, let's call the meeting to order and go around with introductions.
Big Noble, Farmer Rancher,
Dick Smith, grumpy old farmer from Cooper Mountain Critical Groundwater area.
Eric Schneider, Schneider Water.
Robin Cook, hydrogeologist.
All right, and online, we've got GWAC member Brandon Brown.
I'm Brandon Brown, Water Well Developing and Surveys out of Umatilla, Oregon.
All right, and the rest of the folks here are department staff, so I'm just gonna hold introductions and folks can introduce themselves when they come on to present later on in the meeting, if that works.
All right, good. Just we'll move along to approval of the March 25 meeting summary. I assume everybody got a copy and had an opportunity to peruse it. Any changes? Additions, deletions? If not, they stand approved by acclamation.
Uh,
And apparently Linda Ray has some reimbursement options.
I do, but
Yeah.
just for formalities, just for public meeting laws, we need a motion and a second for the minutes.
I'll make motion to accept the minutes.
Thanks.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Thank you, I appreciate that. So my name is Linda Ray and I am the Administrative Specialist for Technical Services Division. And I am here to talk to you about House Bill 2992 briefly. And how it affects you as, or potentially could affect you as a GWAC member. So the House Bill 2992 is intended to promote equity and remove barriers to public participation. And they determined, let me share my PowerPoint, they determined that you are eligible as a GWAC member because.
All right, can you share that with the online?
Oh, yes. Chat. And I got final chat.
Box bond.
You're right.
That's fine.
Okay, let's try this again. Now, can you see online?
Not yet so far.
Here. Okay,
Can you
So-
take it out of present or put it in presentation mode? There we go. Slideshow, yeah, thank you.
okay, so since GWAC was formed by a specific statute, which I believe is ORS 536090, it.
Okay, sorry, you need to do one more thing.
What do I do?
So I think we're seeing, that's really weird.
Do you want to try?
Yeah, real quick. I think that is.
Here, let's try it over. There we go. It's not.
That works.
Does that work?
Beautiful.
Well, as long as you're okay.
Calling it.
Oh. Sorry, one second. Let's see if I can. That's what we want. Okay, sorry about that.
Okay, so GWAC is formed by a specific statute, which I said was ORS 536090. So as that statute states, you're eligible for travel reimbursements for your mileage, which has already been part of our routine with you. House Bill 2992 has changed so that you can be compensated if you are eligible and a qualified member for compensation of up to $178 for your official duties as being part of GWAC. So what qualifies you as an individual to be a qualified candidate is members are those with an adjusted gross income in the previous tax year of less than 50,000 or less than 100,000 as reported on a joint tax return. So you're income based. And you also need to know if you would choose, if you are qualified and you would like to be compensated, your compensation could also be affected by taxes. The other restrictions on what makes you a qualified or qualified members cannot be in full-time public service, so federal, state, local, or university. And if you are qualified and you choose to be compensated, there's a self-assessment form that you will fill out for your taxes annually. And then we'll also put you into Workday, which is an online software program that our HR and finance uses so that you can get paid. So we looked at what are the official duties of a GWAC member, and we went back to the state statute, which are right here. You advise the commission on all matters related to rules for the development, securing use and protection of groundwater, licensing of well constructors, including examination of such persons for license. Review the proposed expenditures of all revenues generated under ORS 5377.7625. And then one of the other stipulations is that the committee shall meet at least once every 3 months and at other times and places as the commissions may specify. So we meet quarterly, so that is how you qualify as a committee under House Bill 2992 to be compensated, and then it goes to the next level of your income if you're eligible or not. So as an agency, because of House Bill 2992, we have the opportunity to compensate you. And like I said, if you do qualify and want to be compensated, we will put you into Workday. So we'll need some of your information like your social security phone number, address, and also some of your tax information. There's also a discrimination and harassment-free workplace training that you'll have to take that's online, that's very, very easy, painless. And then, like I said, the compensation self-assessment form, you'll have to renew every year annually just to prove that you meet in those financial brackets. So if you are interested, if you see those stipulations and you qualify, please contact me and I would love to help you get started on filling out the form and getting into Workday and being compensated for your time. Most of all, we just really appreciate you.
Thank you, Linda. Any questions? Comments? I guess we can move along to the Harney Basin Critical Area Rulemaking Update by Jason.
Jason's not able to make it this morning, so I'm going to jump in and present with Kelly Mines, our rule coordinator. And Justin, if you could allow me to share. See if it actually works. There, it looks like it went. You able to see the screen?
Yep, we gotcha. And
Perfect. So thank you, members of GWAC, for having us here to present again on this Harney rulemaking update.
Hey, Tim.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I just give a quick intro here, as far as, just want to revisit, GWAC's function and purpose related to Division 512 and remind of a little history, especially for the folks that, are new this year. So one of the statutory, charges for GWAC is to provide advice to the commission on any rule changes related to groundwater. This Harney Basin work has been going on in some form for about 10 years, the rulemaking for the last 2+ years. We've, Richard's smiling, it's been a perennial, agenda item for pretty much that whole time, I would guess. So also recognize that some folks are just coming into it and haven't had that full background. So the ultimate goal is to have folks feel sufficiently comfortable with being informed that they can, you guys can hash out a piece of advice for the commission on the rules as proposed. The way we've done that in the past, is that we've, provided kind of informational updates, had a question and answer session, and then if the committee was ready, we put up a document on the screen and we typed out, people in discussion would hash out, hey, as a group, what would we like to say, and pass that on. We need to, by law, get that done within the public comment period. Public comment period just opened up at the beginning of this month. It goes till early August. We don't have to have a committee approved piece of advice today. In the past, we have called extra meetings kind of off the quarterly schedule to meet within the public comment period and talk that out. I will say, in chatting with Tim yesterday, the plan for us updating the commission is kind of a 2-part plan, and so this is essentially the same information that we're going to be giving the commission. However, we're also planning to give the commission in September further presentation and update that has the specific rule language in it. And I don't think that this presentation, and Tim can correct me if I'm wrong, has any of the specific rule language. So I forwarded that out to folks. I know that maybe there, I don't know. It seems like there was a problem with the link, so I want to acknowledge that and just say, while my initial email out to folks was, hey, we're going to ask you for some addition. I don't know that I've gotten you all the information you need, but I'll let you guys tell me that. And B, other folks that weren't able to make it today did say, hey, I'm not able to make it, but I'd love to do this if we had another meeting. So I'll provide that to you too. So just want to lay out kind of what our process has been in the past, so you know kind of what the context is, and also I want to remove any pressure that my earlier email might have put on, like in the introduction to this, and hey, we're looking for advice to the commission. Doesn't have to be today. Happy to schedule another meeting with everybody, toward the end of the public comment period to gather more information and give you time to look at the rules if that's what you want to do, the actual specific regulation. So with that, I'll put it back over to Tim, who again is going to kind of review the background and then talk about how through the RAC and a very long RAC process, we've engaged with the community to craft up the rules as proposed by the commission. So thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Justin. So it looks like Jason was able to make it. So we're going to go through this presentation. And as Justin mentioned, this is what we're intending to present to the commission. And we're looking for feedback and input from you all on the presentation. And any questions you may have, we'd love to answer as we go through this. So we'll introduce ourselves as we go through the process. So for the record, I'm Tim Seymour. I'm the assistant manager for the groundwater section here at the department. And we're going to dive into the 512 rulemaking update here. So we've talked about this multiple times with this group over the course of 6 years. The Water Resources Department and the USGS participated in a collaborative basin study with the goal of better understanding the groundwater resource in the Harney Basin and determining what the problems are and basically providing the scientific background for how we would make management decisions going forward. So that study published in 2022, a Harney Basin groundwater model published in early 2024, and what the conclusion of that study was is that there's one groundwater reservoir, and here on the right-hand side of the screen you can see a map, and that is the Harney Basin groundwater study area, and that boundary there basically coincides with what we've determined to be one groundwater reservoir. So all groundwater is connected there. That groundwater occurs in multiple connected geologic units. So think rocks. So the water's moving through those rocks. And it's going to behave differently depending on which geologic unit the water is within. So different types of rocks have different properties and water moves differently through them. But at the end of the day, there are no known barriers to flow of groundwater throughout the entire basin. And then rates and magnitudes of recharge and discharge vary based on location. So the uplands are generally areas of recharge. The lowlands are generally areas where discharge is happening, either naturally through springs, streams, groundwater dependent ecosystems, and those native vegetations that are able to actually tap into groundwater. And the majority of the pumping happens in the lowlands as well. And so we have this one groundwater reservoir. And so when we look at, what are the problems there in the Harney Basin, there's two key points here. Groundwater levels have declined excessively, which means that there's a greater than 50 feet of total decline has occurred in wells there. And groundwater levels are also excessively declining, which means that there are wells that are declining at greater than 3 feet per year for at least 10 years consecutively. And we'll dive more into that in a moment. And then the second point here is that the available groundwater supply is being or is about to be overdrawn. And what that means is that pumping exceeds recharge. So all recharge coming in to the groundwater system is being pumped in a portion of the groundwater reservoir. And that's a really serious condition because it means that there is no groundwater recharge coming in that is then going to natural discharge in the form of springs and streams or to those natural native vegetations that are able to tap into groundwater. And so if all groundwater recharge is being used for pumpage, it's a pretty negative situation for the ecology out there in that portion of the basin. So diving in a little bit deeper, here on the right is a map. This is zoomed in. The lake here is Malheur Lake. The city of Burns is up here in the upper left corner. And these are all of the wells that have declined excessively. And that means that greater than 50 feet of decline from our highest known water levels has been observed in these wells. And the number of wells that meet this threshold is limited by a lack of historic measurement and a lack of current measurement. So in order to be able to evaluate for declined excessively, we have to have a historic water level and a current water level. And we have that in these wells that are shown on this map, the red dots here. But that doesn't mean that that's all the wells that have declined excessively. We believe that these are representative of a much larger problem in the basin. And if we had more historic data and more current data, we would see more wells on this map that have crossed this threshold. And we also believe that based on our evaluation, that more wells are going to reach this threshold in the next several years. So if we looked at the next criteria here is excessively declining. So that's, again, that decline rate of 3 feet per year for at least 10 years. we've got, again, the same map segment, and we've got the wells there labeled in yellow. And again, in order to be able to perform this test, we have to have sufficient data. And so in these wells that are on this map, we had the data to be able to determine that they've crossed this threshold. But again, we believe there would be more wells on this map if we had the data for every well in the basin. And we also believe that more wells will reach this threshold within the next several years based on current rates of decline and our observation well network and data gathering in the basin. So we've got these two pretty serious groundwater level decline issues going on in the Harney Basin. And then the other criteria here that I talked about was overdrawn. And so here on the right, we've got a map from the groundwater study. The Harney Basin boundary is outlined and filled in with 3 different colors. The 3 different colors represent 3 different water budget regions. So this is where the USGS and WRD staff worked to calculate the actual recharge for each of those areas. And then we have a yellow boundary here in the middle that represents what was determined to be the lowlands by the USGS study. And so when we talk about pumpage exceeding recharge, what we are evaluating here, what we were able to evaluate is within the lowlands, the amount of recharge that's occurring as compared to the amount of pumpage within that lowland. And here on the left, we've got a table that shows the breakdown by region and how overdrawn or not that area is. And so our first column here is the difference between lowland recharge and pumpage. So within that yellow boundary, within that colored block here. And so for the north, it'd be this area here. We're currently out of balance by 2,700, or we're currently overdrawn by 2,700 acre feet per year. So actual pumpage is exceeding recharge by 2,700 acre feet. And we have severe declines going on in that area, as was seen on the previous 2 maps. If we look at that, the difference for that area in terms of lowland recharge against authorized use, so how much pumpage could occur, there's about 96,000 acre feet per year authorized more than recharge is coming in. And so this area is by definition overdrawn because pumpage exceeds recharge, and it's significantly at risk of being even more overdrawn because so much more pumpage could occur. If we look at the southern region, the area is not overdrawn by definition, and the difference of lowland recharge and authorized use is still within the realm of not allowing overdrawn to occur. And then within the western water budget region, here in the western portion of the basin, pumpage is less than recharge by about 4,500 acre feet, which we believe is very close to being overdrawn and what we're going to call about to be overdrawn for the purposes of this. And when we then look at the difference in recharge versus authorized use exceeds recharge by 18,000 acre feet. And so if this basin is, or if this portion of the basin is allowed to continue to develop that and actually pump their authorized use, we would be overdrawn by some 18,000 acre feet. And so we're calling this Western water budget region about to be overdrawn. And then when we look at the basin as a whole, we're not quite overdrawn by definition. But if we look at the authorized pumping, if all authorized pumping were to occur, we would be overdrawn by 104,000 acre feet. And so by statute, we have portions of the basin that are overdrawn or about to be overdrawn. And so we want to manage this problem, and we need to address this problem as a whole. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jason to let him talk about our strategy here.
Thanks, Tim. Good morning. For the record, my name is Jason Spreet. I'm the East Region Manager out here in Baker City. So I wanted to go over some of the strategies we are going to be using to address these issues. Next slide, please. So some of the strategies, or these are our primary strategies, are to protect recharge with a classification of the upland areas. Well, actually of the Harney Basin, the study area that's within the Harney and Grant counties. Also, we're going to attempt to reduce groundwater use through critical groundwater area designation, through voluntary agreements, conservation reserve enhancement program also for groundwater in Harney. And then we want to better monitor things out there in the basin. And to do that, we are going to implement a serious water management problem area. And we'll get into some more of those details on the next slide. Thanks, Tim. So the first one, classification really is to protect the recharge, and that classification boundary will help us prevent further groundwater development in the uplands, and the uplands is where the majority of the recharge occurs. That classification boundary is shown. I assume you guys have the staff report, so that's Exhibit 4. And within the classification is only going to allow for exempt uses and then non-consumptive geothermal uses. Next slide. And then in order to reduce groundwater use, we're going to implement the critical area, which specifies, as the rules specify how those reductions can occur. It includes an adaptive management plan that allows the department to adjust management into the future. The boundary of this is Exhibit 6 in the staff report. It'll establish a permissible total withdrawal. And then, like I said, it establishes how those reductions will occur through the adaptive management plan. And those reductions are scheduled to begin in 2028. We are also hopefully utilizing the statute for voluntary agreements, where users can work together to reduce use and achieve the groundwater goals for the critical area. Department staff in that will have capacity there to provide some technical assistance for those voluntary agreements. We've already developed a draft guidance document to help guide users to a voluntary agreement that we think the department could agree to, or could potentially the commission could agree to. And then we also have this the CREP program, the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, where we would enroll acres that are required to cancel the groundwater right in order to enroll, but the benefit for the user is they get a payment for up to 15 years on that if they sign up. So we can enroll up to 20,000 acres in Harney County. The first round of enrollment actually was due June 6th. We have a number of offers out there for enrollment. And if there's available acreage across the country, which is, the total available to sign up is about 2 million across the entire country, it's likely that the users will have another opportunity to enroll prior to July 31st. Next slide, please. So the swamp or serious water management problem area helps us achieve accountable use by requiring flow meters on all points of appropriation by March 1st, 2028. There is an exemption in there for any points of appropriation that have been regulated off and disconnected from the infrastructure, and also must record that use monthly and report annually. So anybody that has to install a flow meter on their point of appropriation will be required to record that use every month and then report every year. Next slide, please. So we wanted to limit the impacts as much as possible from the critical area. And some of the ways that we are doing that in both an environmental and domestic sense here is we are front loading our proposed curtailment. So 40% of our proposed curtailment will is proposed to occur in 2028. This will result in some higher final water levels, which obviously fewer dry domestic wells as a result of that. less reduction in natural discharge into streams and springs, and also less reduction in evapotranspiration by groundwater dependent ecosystems. We also are requiring a durable stability, so stability that is lasting, not just a temporary stability, but a good solid level at which we can say we are stable. And then we require recovery in Weaver Springs, which reduces impacts to domestic wells in that area substantially. Weaver Springs is one of the areas we've seen the highest rates of decline. Next slide, please. And then we also wanted to limit economic impacts on the community as much as possible. So we set a goal of stability rather than trying to get to recovery in most areas. We optimized the model to identify the smallest reductions in pumping required to achieve durable stability. So, the minimum amount of reductions we think we will need to achieve that stability. We created sub areas that allowed for more targeted water use reductions. So we're not, if we did it in a broad scale, we would probably need to curtail further to achieve that stability level. And then requiring stability in only half of the wells rather than a higher percentage. So we considered maybe doing an 80% level. 80% of the wells need to be still stable, but we ended up deciding at only 50%. So we have just the median number of wells that need to be stable to achieve success. And then the timeline to achieve that goal, we set at 30 years rather than right out of the gate or as soon as we start curtailment. And the reason we did that was to give the community time to adapt to these curtailments. And we are phasing in those reductions in 6-year increments over a 24-year period rather than immediately as well, which also gives the community time to adjust and time for folks that are out there farming today to plan ahead for the future. We also are implementing, as I mentioned earlier, an adaptive management plan in the rules, which will allow us to monitor the trend moving forward, and we can adjust to prevent any over curtailment that may happen if we see something that is far off from what the model shows us so far. And the initial allotment to each water user, the amount of water going to each user or each water right is going to be based on historic use rather than paper water rights. We are finding across the basin a number of users are not using their full paper water right in order to produce their crop, and we wanted to make sure that we don't over allocate so we can spread that water as much as we can that we have available. Next slide. And now I'll turn it back over to Tim to go over the WRD proposal.
Thanks, Jason. So what I want to go over here is what we presented to the RAC at our last couple of RAC meetings and some of the modeling results that came out of that so that we can also understand essentially what the proposal is for reductions and then what the results of those reductions will be for water levels and for domestic well users and for the natural system. So I believe we've shown this slide previously. This has been updated to our most recent version of the proposal. And so there's a number of different parameters that we can put into the model to essentially test our management scenario and how effective it is. And we'll just run through these parameters here really quickly. So for a spatial extent, what is the area in which we're going to be working and how is it divided up? We have proposed 7 sub areas, and I'll show a map here on the next slide of what those 7 sub areas are. They're also in the staff report and proposed rules packet, so you could take a look at the maps there as well. For our stability success metric, so how do we determine what stable is within the model? We've defined that as a durable median, which is a 50th percentile of well cells. So basically what that means is half the wells need to be stable or recovering, and half the wells need to be stable or could continue to be declining. So that median value for the subarea needs to be stable in order for us to determine that to be success. And when we say durable, we mean that has to continue for the full duration of the model run, which is through 2098. So basically the end of the century, we need to see water levels remain stable. And then for specifically Weaver Springs, we fixed the PTW value at 75%, requiring recovery in that area because it is by far the deepest cone of depression in the basin with the most historic declines at over 100 feet. And as Jason pointed out, raising those water levels in that area will have substantial benefits for domestic wells in that area, as well as it does reduce to some extent the amount of flow, groundwater flow from nearby subareas, thereby reducing the amount of reduction or curtailment that has to occur in those subareas as well. We're proposing to set the timeline to achieve this goal of durable stability at 30 years. We are implementing adaptive management. That's what we're proposing. And the intent is to have those adaptive management check-ins every 6 years. So curtailment would happen, and there would be 6 years of no additional change while we monitor. And then the next scheduled curtailment would go into effect 6 years later. Our timeline for reductions, as Jason said, we're setting a 24-year period over which those reductions will occur, and we're front-loading those reductions. So of the total amount of curtailment, 40% would be implemented at the start, 30% at year 6, 15 at year 12, 10% at year 18, and then 5% at year 24. And in Weaver Springs, we've set that subarea again because of its unique nature and severity of declines at a different schedule, with 75% of its total reduction coming in year 0 at the start, and 25% coming at year 6 in that schedule. And then in past discussions, we had talked about potentially modeling and limiting the model based on some natural or discharge to streams and springs, to natural EFT, or to the number of dry domestic wells. And for a number of reasons, we have chosen not to use those as constraints to set PTW, and instead we're going to try to limit the impacts to those, as we've said, by front-loading that curtailment, which results in those higher final water levels, fewer impacts to streams and springs, and to natural ET. So that's the proposal as a whole, and how we intend to lay out the reductions. So what is and here's the subarea map. As you can see, there's 7 subareas. And if you have a moment to take a look at the actual map, when you take a look at the rules, you can really dive in there deep if you pull up the PDF. And so what does this mean for actual PTW? What does pumpage come out to? So as Jason said, we optimized the model to identify the least amount of pumpage reductions to achieve our goal. So with those input parameters, those schedules, the requirement for durable stability, what does that come out to for PTW? And so here we've got a table, subarea and overall, and then we've got the 2018 modeled pumpage. So that's the last year at which we have estimated use values in the Harney Basin groundwater model. And you can see in 1,000 acre feet how much pumpage was occurring in each of these subareas, and then what the PTW is proposed to be. So overall, basin-wide, we're proposing a 35% reduction in pumpage over a 24-year period. And the most severe subarea being reduced is Weaver Springs at 75%, which we fixed. And the next most severe is Lower Blitzen Voltage at 39% reduction, based on our modeling in order to achieve durable stability. That's the quantity of reduction needed. And then the least affected subarea is Dog Mountain at a 9% reduction. So reductions are proposed at different levels based on the subarea and what it takes to stabilize groundwater levels basin-wide and within each subarea. So the modeling took into account that we needed to achieve the goal not only at the basin level, but within each subarea, and then it optimized within each subarea to what was the least amount of reduction we could get to both basin-wide and within a subarea to achieve the goal. So what does the schedule then look like? So if we put it in terms of percentages, and I'm still working on an effective way to show this information, but what we're trying to display here is basically what are we proposing for reductions? There's concern that this proposal would over curtail in the basin or potentially not take into account changes that have occurred in the uplands with recent fires and the good water years in the past couple of years. And what we're proposing here on the whole is in 2028, an 18% basin-wide reduction in pumping. And then a 6-year break in which we'd monitor groundwater levels, and we have an adaptive management plan by which we would adjust the next scheduled round of curtailment based on actual water levels in the basin and how water levels are responding. So we've modeled out a trajectory to getting to success, what we expect to happen after that 18% curtailment. And if water levels are higher than expected, we could actually reduce this next percentage of curtailment. So instead of applying 10% curtailment, we could apply up to we either half or 0% of that curtailment. So instead of being at 10, it would be at 5 or at 0% curtailment, depending on what water levels do. And that's how ahead of schedule are we. On the flip side, if water levels are much worse than we expected, this value could increase by 1.5 or 2 times. So it could be 15% or 20% basin-wide curtailment. And then again, we have a 6-year break. We monitor our groundwater levels. We track, what our progress is towards success. And in 2040, we reevaluate, and then we'd apply the next round of curtailment. And if you add up all these percentages, you get to the 35% by the end of the management period. In 2052, we'd be at 35% basin-wide reduction. And so you can see what that breaks down to if you break down each of the percentages for each subarea, what the schedule looks like for them. And again, all these percentages are based on 2018 modeled pumpage, which is our most recent estimated water use year that was put into the model. As a side note, we have done some estimations of water use, and water use does not appear to be increasing in the basin. It appears to be plateaued. And so 2018 is actually representative of like today's water use in the basin. So what does this do to the actual groundwater levels? So here I've got a map that's showing water level rates of change. So this is how much water levels are changing year over year. And we've got a scale from dark red to dark blue that goes from -1 foot of decline per year to +1 foot of decline per year. I want to note that all of these scales are maxed out. There are cells within the model. The darkest blue is well above 1.0, and the darkest red is well below -1.0. The reason we held the scale at 1.0 to -1.0 was so that we could actually see what's going on in much of the basin. If we set the scale appropriately, and usually that's about 20 to -20, we end up with basically what looks like white in a lot of the basin, and so you can't tell what's going on. So this is a map on the left. It shows year 0, so basically the start. So what we anticipate groundwater level decline rates to be in 2028 when we start curtailment. And as you can see, you've got this really severe cone of depression here in Weaver Springs. Up in the northeast portion of the basin, we have these ongoing severe declines. And then we've got broad declines going on across much of the basin. In the figure here on the right, the map shows after 10 years what we expect to be happening. So this would be 2038 in our model simulation. And as you can see, that cone of depression in Weaver Springs has changed from being declining to being recovering. And so now water levels are recovering there because we've imposed at this point the full curtailment for Weaver Springs because it's been 10 years, and we'll implement full curtailment in the first 6 years there. And then much of the basin, the rate of decline has slowed or actually halted in some places, but this northeast section is still declining at a fairly strong pace. And so that's 10 years in. If we then jump to 20 years in, you can see that Weaver Springs Cone of Depression is still filling in, but much of the basin has stabilized or is reaching, a stable state. We have a little bit of recovery in portions of the Northeast, but we still have some ongoing declines in that Northeast area. And then after 30 years, which is when we're supposed to achieve success, we've gotten to a place where the median groundwater level in each, or the median water level rate of change in each subarea is now 0. And so while there are still some areas of decline occurring within these subareas, they're balanced out by areas that have stabilized or are recovering. And so we've achieved our goal here. And then if we take it all the way out to 60 years, we can see that from 40 years to 60 years, we continue to see those rates of change move towards 0 and the map become more white. Even the area where we're recovering water levels is becoming more and more white. So we can see the basin is equilibrating and stabilizing at the new equilibrium based on the amount of recharge and the amount of pumpage. And so that's what we expect from water levels from a rate of change standpoint. So now I want to talk about median water levels, and this is the actual water level and how much difference we expect there to be from 2018 to 2058, which is that 30-year period where we achieve durable success or durable stability, which is our success metric. And so what you can see here is that depending on the subarea, the actual water level in 2058 varies widely. With Weaver Springs, the water level being 8.7 feet higher than it was in 2018, and Northeast Crane, the most severe place of decline that's allowed, is actually 16 feet below the median water level in 2018. And so what we're seeing here is that these declines occur and are being allowed as we bring the system into balance. And so the worst would be this 16 feet of decline there in Northeast Crane. But most other subareas are in the 4 to 5 feet of decline range, or they're positive. And Sylvie's is basically 0 at 0.2 feet. The third column here I've got is the USGS 2018, continued 2018 pumping simulation. So USGS, when they published their model report, ran a simulation where they continued 2018 pumpage through the end of the century, and we have water levels to compare to there. And so I'm showing what those water levels are in 2058 as compared to 2018. And then in the last column here, I'm showing what the difference is between our proposal and essentially doing nothing. And what we can see is that in portions of the basin, it has 2 to 4 feet of difference. In Weaver Springs, it's 55 feet higher than it would be otherwise. And in Northeast Crane, we're 14 feet higher than we would have been if we'd done nothing. So the intent of this is to show that, yes, we're accepting some ongoing declines as we stabilize the basin, as we give people a glide path to adjust from an economic standpoint, but we're still having a substantial impact on water levels as compared to what would happen if we were to do nothing. Then if we dive into anticipated domestic well impacts here, I've got a couple of figures that show the figure on the left shows our proposed management scenario, and the figure the bar on the right shows the USGS continued 2018 pumping simulation. So again, I'll call that the what if we did nothing. And here in blue, we've got wells that are modeled wet. So that means the water level is at or above the bottom of the well in that model cell. And green is modeled dry. So that means the water level in that cell has dropped to below the level of the bottom of the well. And as you can see, our proposal is We estimate about 101 dry domestic wells in 2058 based on our proposal. And if we did nothing, there'd be 157 dry wells. One thing I want to point out is that many of these dry wells are estimated to go dry in the early portions of our modeling simulation. So between 2018 and today, there's been a substantial amount of decline. And it's 10 full years from 2018 to when we're proposing to start reductions in 2028. And a substantial amount of decline has happened and is continuing to happen. And many of these dry wells are coming from that. And so the dry well change is not as great as I would have hoped, but it is substantially better than doing nothing. 56 fewer dry wells there. And to be clear, this is just domestic dry wells. We're not evaluating for irrigation wells here. And we anticipate irrigation wells will be going dry too over this period as declines continue. Now, if we look at the anticipated change in natural discharge, got a couple bars here. On the left are springs and streams. And the blue is an average of 2017 and 2018. The green is the quantity of discharge in 2058. So left, we've got springs and streams. On the right, we've got evapotranspiration. The y-axis is in thousands of acre feet, and it goes in tens. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60,000 acre feet. And we're anticipating these changes in evapotranspiration, which is that natural native vegetation using groundwater, and the impacts to springs and streams. So it's about almost 5,000 acre feet difference in springs and streams between 2017, 2018, and 2058. And it's about 11,000 acre feet in evapotranspiration, and that's per year. So again, by allowing a phase-in period for curtailment, we are going to see some impacts to natural discharge in the basin. All right, and now I'm going to turn it over to Kelly, who's going to talk through the fiscal impact. And
thanks, Tim. For the record, my name is Kelly Mines. I am the rules coordinator for this process. As Tim said, I'm going to be taking you through the fiscal impact statement for these rules. I think we've put together a pretty extensive fiscal impact, and the intent of this conversation today is keep it very high level. If you want to know more, I point you towards the fiscal impact. So next slide, please. So just as a reminder, I'm sure I've said this to you before, but the fiscal impact statement is a requirement from the Secretary of State when we follow our rules for public comment. And it consists of two elements. One, it's the estimated economic impact. And what we're looking for is an evidence-based summary of the anticipated economic effects of the rules. And the second component here is the cost of compliance. Basically, what is it going to cost for agencies, members of the public, small businesses, and local government to comply with these rules? So I'm going to take you through each one of these elements and talk about a high level what we've covered. So go ahead and the next slide. So for the estimated the economic impacts, we covered 4 areas here. So first one would be characterizing the Harney County economy. There we have a conversation on what are the main, that Harney County is a ag-heavy economy, what are the main crops, and what are the percentages of sales for both livestock and alfalfa being the main crop. And then we also have a conversation on the Harney Basin's economies benefit significantly from the natural ecosystems there. So we're talking springs and streams, wetlands that support recreational activities centered around the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge there. Then we get into impacts of implementing a critical groundwater area. And that's broken up into two blocks, right? So the first block would be assessing the impacts of continued pumping. Um, so what are the economic impacts if we just let pumping continue as going? And where we assess there is we assess the impacts on, okay, how are domestic wells going to be impacted if we continue with pumping? How are irrigation wells going to be impacted if we continue pumping? We also assess what the impacts are going to be to springs, streams, the Matter Your Life refuge there. And then the second aspect of this is what are the economic impacts of implementing a critical ground area? So we cover the same things there. So impacts domestic wells, springs and streams, irrigation. And then we hired a economist, Echo Northwest, to do the assessment of what it will be to the agriculture, what the impacts to the agricultural economy on reducing groundwater pumpage. So that data is included within that assessment of implementing a critical groundwater area. We also are assessing the SWAMPA impacts. Remember, that's the measurement and reporting. So essentially, we right now in the basin, we have 1,074 POAs that are required to report, and we're going to have an additional 336 new POAs that are going to be required to report. So there's going to be costs associated with that, economic costs associated with that. They're going to have to install a flow meter, have to be specifications. So we have that conversation there. We discussed those impacts in the SWAMPA, and as far as classification impacts. Pretty high level. We've already classified a administrative boundary called the Greater Harney Valley Area of Concern back in 2016 for exempt uses only, and so we don't anticipate much impacts for classification because we are planning on just to classify with exempt and non-conceptive geothermal uses. So that's kind of the structure of the physical impact, and then we can move on to the cost of compliance. On the next slide, please. Thank you. Again, so we assess the cost of compliance for the critical groundwater rules, the SWAMPA rules, and the classification rules, right? And so we talk about what's the cost of compliance for OWRD and other agencies to comply with these rules. Local government, specifically Echo Northwest, did an assessment on what impacts will be to tax revenue and services provided by those tax revenue. So that's included in this assessment. Impacts of members of the public. So when we talk about cost of compliance, we really focus on the domestic well users and the available funds for the well abandonment repair and replacement fund, as well as the Harney Domestic Well Fund. And then impacts to small businesses as well, right? And so those are all covered with the critical groundwater, the SWAMPA, and the classification there. The next slide, please. So as far as what we have left in the rulemaking schedule, right? So public comment started June 2nd. I believe you guys got the notice forwarded you by Justin. We have, I think, an extensive engagement planned for the basin. So June 23rd to 26th, we're going to be going sub-area by sub-area and doing a combination of an informational session. So basically what you guys have been hearing today, what's our plan, how will this affect the community, and then it's going to be followed by a public hearing. So we're going to be doing 8 of those, June 23rd to 26th. And then we're going to be coming back in August on the 4th and the 5th and doing public hearings there. And then public comment period is going to end August 7th by 5 p.m. All comments need to be received. And then we're going to start working on drafting our report. We'll come back to the commission in September to kind of do more of a deeper dive of what the actual rule language. And then hopefully in December, we'll bring the rules for adoption. So that's the plan for the 512 rulemaking schedule and kind of our next steps here. I'm just going to repeat ourselves a little bit, right? Public comment has begun June 2nd. Sub-area info sessions and hearings are June 23rd through the 26th. We'll have more public hearings here on August 4th and 5th. Public comment ends on August 7th, and our draft reports will be we'll be drafting August through September there, and hopefully in the December we will be bringing the rules for adoption. Any public comment that wish to be submitted, please send it to me. And yep, thank you.
Okay, thanks, appreciate the presentation, folks. I think at this point, open up to the committee to ask any questions or.
How many wells total in the basin, both irrigation and domestic?
I don't have that number off the top of my head. We believe there are about 1,000 points of appropriation, actual wells. And there are, as I showed in the slide, somewhere around 900 and almost 1,000 domestic wells also that are in the model. Obviously, there are many wells out there that do not have well logs that were either drilled prior to when a well log was required or may have been drilled without filing a well log. So I can't say that that is a comprehensive number. We do know there are wells out there that we do not have in the model, but it's about, I'd say about 2,000.
Thank you.
On your public hearings, how do you notify everybody? How is it public? You know, you guys send mailings, put on a computer?
Great question. So we are required by our Division 10 rules to notify the public, to send a mailer to all groundwater rights holders, all tax lot owners, and then all registered well drillers of the public comment period. And on that mailer, they can go to the website, and all the information has been posted on the website about what the details for the public hearing. We've also sent out mass emails to, I'm going to say, over 1,000 people and Gov Delivery, and then we're working with community partners within the basin who are getting the word out to the community. And I've gotten a bunch of phone calls asking when those information premium. So that Harney County knows of these informational sessions, and we're hoping that they'll be well attended.
That's been one of our problems. Notifying public is getting the word out because it's a rural area and not everybody's on computers and.
Yeah.
People
That's
don't
been,
know.
sorry. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm done.
Yep, no, that was, sorry, Kelly, just a statement in the room, from a committee member that it can be an issue in rural counties to get the word out, especially when folks aren't on computers, so. And I think we were doing our best to work on that. We have this place-based planning work that the department has helped fund, but is community-led, and they have their own facilitator. That has been ongoing throughout the rule process, and they do periodic interviews with the local radio station out there as well. And then I don't know, Kelly, if you can talk about other folks who were trying to get on there. Like, the department doesn't have a social media presence, but we try and work that I don't know for sure in the Harney, and I'll ask Kelly, but like in other areas, we try and work with entities that do. So the Soil and Water Conservation District has a social media page, and we try and get it up there for the local folks in rural areas to get involved.
Well, I just feel it's real important to get everybody notified.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
make
yeah.
their own choice, because that is one of the biggest problems I've seen with public stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I point out that we sent the mass mailer because of our Division 10 rules, and that requirement was specifically requested to be added by this group when we were updating those rules 2 years ago. So, or 2.5, whatever that was. So, a while ago.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder, Tim. I forgot about that. But yeah, that's right. We have talked about that.
So how's the department going to find the appropriators that don't have well logs, don't have recorded wells, that need to put a meter on?
That's a great question for Jason.
Thanks, Tim. That is a really good question. We have a pretty good idea of where most of the irrigation is occurring in the basin. We have the water right to go off of, so we can certainly use that. There are going to be wells we don't find for a while. And part of the effort is going to have just boots on the ground out there. We've got a water master and assistant water master, plus we have folks that work in GIS in my office that are in tune to the basin there. So we will find those wells, and then there's been some talk about there are wells that have been drilled that are not on a water right somewhere. They may not be one of these old wells that we spoke about, but they maybe were a replacement well. And so we're talking about processes to get those either incorporated into a water right somehow, or if they're a replacement for a planned well that was in another area, but it's on the same irrigation system, we're looking at the possibility of just an expedited process to get those legal. I have a well inspector that spends a lot of time in Harney County as well, that I'm sure is aware of some of these situations, and something that we're going to have to work through.
Coming from a existing critical groundwater area myself, I find it difficult to come to terms with living with a 30-year time frame to reach stabilization, let alone to reach recovery. Because in our instance, we had recovery within 10 years. Now, granted, we have different geology, different means of recharge, but I would, in my mind, would like to see a little faster recovery, looking at it in particular from domestic wells, because on the chart we were willing to live with 100 people's wells going dry 6 years from now, or 6 years from implementation. And I find that hard to stomach.
I think we've heard that from many of the RAC members in this process. And as a comparison, you're right, it's a different situation. And I think that in the Cooper Bowl Mountain, as we were discussing in the room just before the meeting started, majority of the use was by a couple municipal entities. So how many water rights again, Tim or Jason, are we looking at managing here?
670-ish at last
Yeah.
count, but that changes.
So we have a much bigger, just process wise, we have a much bigger group of people that we need to work with to lower pumping, and all those folks are going to have to make their own individual decisions on how to adjust. Whereas in Cooper Bowl Mountain, I believe it was 3 main municipal and community water providers. Essentially, they had access. It took money to build pipelines and interties, but they had access to surface water. So Scoggins Reservoir and the Bull Run Reservoir essentially are what the Cooper Bowl Mountain folks that are on municipal provided water, community provided water from TDWD, that was the solution. And here in this geography, we just don't have surface water availability to backfill, or at least economically efficiently backfill that use. And it's completely over appropriated at the moment, right? So, like the surface water supplies have been spoken for. So even if we could get a pipeline to each of those 670 people, there's no water right now.
No, and I understood.
Yeah.
But it's a department created scenario because the state, just say the
Yep,
state,
yep. No, that's fine.
issued too many water rights
Yes,
because they didn't understand the recharge rate 100 years ago.
yeah,
But I believe you also have the authority to go in and control the pumping rates. Granted, I know you don't want to ruin a farmer's life, and that's well appreciated. But a 30-year time frame for stability seems to be an awfully long time.
Yeah, so Justin, can I jump in here for a second? Yeah, so during the RAC process, we evaluated a number of possible management scenarios, and we looked at what shorter timelines would mean. And we tested a scenario in which we implemented 55% curtailment in the basin immediately. And what that showed is that over a period of about 30 years, we would see recovery and then move towards stabilization. And it much closer to what I think you're talking about there. The flip side of that is in our fiscal impact analysis, what the economist identified was that there's about it's a one-to-one relationship between pumpage reductions and economic impacts. And so what that means is that a 10% reduction in pumpage equates to about a 10% reduction in the Harney Basin economy. And so every percentage point that we add in curtailment is a percentage point we take away from that economy. And that's significant. And we heard substantial feedback about doing our best to limit the economic impacts out there. And a concern that in this very rural frontier community, that reducing the economy, that there is likely a threshold at which it begins to really cave in on itself and be a serious problem for the community as a whole to just continue existing. And those impacts go to local governments, to the county government, to schools, those that are, those systems that are based on tax revenue. And so we are trying to balance the impacts between those impacts to domestic well users, like you talked about, and also to the economy as a whole and to the viability of that community. And it is a unique place because it is so agriculturally dependent and so essentially uniform in its one crop. So
Thank you. That's great information. I didn't realize that the impacts were quite that tightly bound together.
yeah, it is a challenge. Like it is an incredible challenge, and we're doing our best to try to navigate it and come to a position of compromise. So
Thank you.
yeah.
I had a quick question about the curtailments. Is it an across the board reduction in pumping, or is it somehow related to priority date, or how does that work?
Yeah, so in the proposed rules, we have a couple of things going on. So we'll talk mostly about irrigation since that's the vast majority of use out there. So what we're proposing is to reduce every water rights duty to 2.5 feet per acre. So no irrigator could irrigate more than 2.5 acre feet. per acre. Most irrigation rights, I think all but 5 are currently at 3 acre-feet per acre. That's the first thing that would happen. So everybody would take a reduction for conservation purposes. The next thing is that, as Jason was talking about, we want to allocate or allot water based on historic use, not based on the paper water right. So we would look at actual irrigated acreage and reduce people down to their actual, irrigated acres. So now their water right then, like the order they would receive tells them you can irrigate this many acres because that's what you've historically irrigated, and you can irrigate that at 2.5 acre-feet per acre. And then the last piece that has to happen, because that doesn't get us down to the amount of reduction that we need, the last thing that has to happen is curtailment by priority date. So starting with the most junior, we would regulate them off until we get to a quantity of use that is equal to the permissible total withdrawal at the end of the time frame. So it's a multi-part sort of answer to your question there, but did that answer it?
Yeah, thank you.
For municipalities, because I know this group has often been interested in municipalities, we are proposing to set their annual volume of use to 110% of what their the previous 6 year or what their use was between 2020 and 2024. So the highest use, single year use in 2020 to 2024, we would allow them 110% of that quantity for the first 6 years, and then every 6 years we would reevaluate, look at their reported use from the prior 6 years, and allot them 110% of whatever their highest single year's use was. So if they are if they're growing, they're using more water, they could grow by up to 10% every 6 years over the period of this plan.
I have a question, and you said you were doing a reduction based on historic use and not acreage or the paper water right. Doesn't that encourage people to go ahead and pump even when they don't need to maintain that if they're gonna be curtailed to what their historic pumping is? Aren't they gonna start pumping as much as they can in order to gear over every 6 year period? If there's reductions, then they're gonna get the maximum available water instead of being curtailed.
Yeah, so the initial allotment, so that first round of reduction is going to be based on pumpage in 2020 through 2024. So that's already occurred. Whatever they do today won't have an effect on that evaluation. So they're locked in what they've been historically using.
And that's because every single water right holder and point of use has a meter on it as of now.
Nope.
So the people that don't have, it's in their best interest if they do have to put a meter on to pump it for as much as they can. Seems like there's could be a concern there.
Well, so the historic acreage is not going to be based on a flow meter reading. What we're looking at would be primarily satellite data and then field surveys by staff over the years that show what acreage was actually irrigated. Right? So it's not how they got water onto the crop, it's whether or not it was irrigated. And this is a rare place where we can do this because without irrigation, those fields are going to be brown in August and September.
And it's the same crop. It's not like it's a variety crop that one crop takes more water than another crop. So it's pretty uniform across the basin.
Right.
Okay.
And as I said, we're cutting everybody's duty down to the same value of 2.5 acre feet is what we're proposing to do. Yeah.
Just seems like you're looking at satellite data for somebody who has one well on there that you know about, but they have 3 more that you don't know about, and they're irrigating a very large acreage. There's a lot of math and a lot of assumptions being made from a satellite view. It's going to take a lot of manpower and computer power to figure out all that, because if they're over appropriating beyond their water right now, and it's looking like that's the acreage they're currently doing, there could be a gap there. Not sure if I'm explaining that correctly, but They might show 1,000 acres and their water rights, slightly less than that, but they're drawing off of 3 points of that you don't even know about, in order to overwater that area, in order to expedite crop growth or whatever, That's it. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I guess the way we're looking at it is one, there is a water right with an acreage value on it, and we're going to be looking at that, and then we're going to be looking at what portion of that was actually irrigated. And so their total allotment cannot exceed their original water right. So if they've been watering every acre in their water right, that's what they'll get. They'll get that amount of acreage. But if they've only been irrigating, 80% of that, they're going to get 80% of their acreage rather than the full acreage. And that allows us to spread the water out to more users. And in the RAC, we gave the prime example or the common example of a center pivot. Usually a water right is a square field or a rectangle of some sort. You put a center pivot on it and that circle only goes around the middle. And a lot of times people don't have the corners covered, and so they're brown. So when we're allotting water, should we give that water right the full square's worth of water, or should we only give them the actual irrigated acreage, which is that, that center circle there? And as we talked about it, we received a lot of feedback that said we should absolutely limit the person to what they were actually irrigating and actually producing a beneficial crop on, and take those corners worth of irrigation and pass them on to the next junior user to try to keep another person in business. And so that's the intent behind the proposal there.
And I guess maybe if I can help, like getting the meters on the wells is intended as a check that nobody's using more than 2.5 acre feet per authorized acre. So they aren't gonna be able to use more and show something on the meter and get more. It's like, here's what you get, and the meter is the double check to make sure you're still
It's just
criteria.
And I'm not a farmer and I'm not an expert, but you could put a certain amount of water and make it look green. And then you can put more water on. So if you have illegal sources, I mean, yeah, they're irrigating a much bigger area, less water, and it still looks like they're within their water right. And they're not. I mean, there's some holes there, but I understand it's very difficult to find those sources.
Well, the deterrent too is the power bill. Power is just going out of control.
Right.
And I don't know of anybody that's gonna use extra water and pay more power to cover that.
Yeah, and I hope with the satellites, you can see power lines. If you see power lines going to places there's no wells. I hope the well inspectors are looking at that, because he's right. I mean, to bury the power lines is 3 times the cost, and I don't know any farmer in the world that wants to pay 3 times as much to bury their lines instead of putting in holes. So.
I have a question for, I don't know if it's for Tim or for Jason about enforcing groundwater decline conditions. And I would assume that those would only be on newer water rights anyway. You talked about how the middle of the wells need to be stable, and so you will still have some wells that are declining. Will those users be subject to enforcement on the decline conditions as well?
That's a great question, and they are subject to enforcement. There has been, I think, how to put this quite delicately, there's been some negotiation on that when it comes to our contested case, as we get towards the contested case process. A lot of that will be, I think, incorporated into the contested case. And we want to try to get these rules implemented. That's kind of the priority for right now. And the permit decline conditions are less of a priority. We are enforcing on reporting static water level reporting conditions. So we're working on that process, and that will will take shape over the next year or so, where we'll start enforcing on those conditions. But as far as decline conditions, we will likely enforce on those until after the contested case and after the rules are adopted and then the contested case process is complete. And then we'll look again at those kinds of things.
Any other questions? Comments? Great presentation. Thank you very much. Been very informative.
Well, thank you all. We appreciate it.
So, I guess before you guys jump off, Tim, Jason, Kelly, can you, I saw the next steps. One thing that wasn't on the line was the September commission meeting. That's after the public information session closes, but I believe that there are some plans to present additional info to the commission in September. I realize that we're working on June right now. That's not going to be finalized, but can you give the committee the current draft idea of what the plan is for September?
I think the current draft idea is to dive into the actual rule language a little bit closer and sort of similar to what was done with allocation, show what some of the key items are and show what the rule language is, what it means, and how it will impact people in the basin. Diving into some of those specifics, like questions that were just answered and asked and answered here today. Like, how does that allotment work? What does it mean for to say historic beneficial use, things like that, or what we're going to try to dive into. And so that's the intent, and that way the commission really understands what the breakdown of the rules are. And then diving into like the scheduling of reductions and then the adaptive management piece as well, so that everyone understands how we're tracking success and then adjusting as needed.
So just give a rough answer to that one, and I'll hear it from the team here. I've also chatted with Jason, Tim, Kelly about preparing that material so that we could present if you all wanted to have another meeting within the public comment period. We could get that information up on the screen for you to walk through it and answer the additional questions that the actual rule language might bring up. So just want to make sure that that's offered and available to you.
I think it'd be helpful to be able to peruse the actual rules.
Yeah.
Before we start throwing opinions out there. Just my opinion. I don't know whether we agree.
Yeah, I would like to see them, yeah, to give any comment.
And the fiscal and state part of that too.
That's correct. Yeah. So based on questions, I already started drafting an email. I've got a link to the actual Secretary of State's filing. So that has the rule language changes as well as the fiscal environmental and racial justice impact statement. Probably. So that's all in that document, and I will get that out to folks to have in their inbox.
Okay. So I think that leads to us having another meeting.
That's
Potentially, if we have a lot of questions, and need to walk through it.
So again, for the I talked about the process up front, and essentially what we do need the committee to provide their input to the commission during the public input process. So that's the time when anybody in the state can, and we've gotten comments from outside the state, have provided their input. We will treat the committee's input I guess, and elevate it up, we call this out as like, hey, here is the commission's, appointed groundwater advisory committee, here's what their recommendation is to the committee. We make that prominent in our evaluation of the public comments, but it is taken with all the other comments.
Yellow highlighter or something.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. So for that, we would need the committee to meet and have a quorum and, put up the motion and vote on it, so, I'd say we have a quorum today, but not all the detailed information, so, seems reasonable to.
Well, I would
schedule.
assume you might have some suggestions as far as a date.
Well, before August 7th, that's my only suggestion, and then it's up to the committee to choose a date that works for you all to get back together, so.
But I assume you may have a calendar,
Oh, I do have it, sure, I can put up a calendar,
because I don't have one in front of me.
let me see what I. I have a calendar and it's my calendar, but I'm happy to share it.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Where do you want to start? Jump ahead here.
Let me share mine.
If you would be willing.
Well, is August 7th a Thursday or Friday?
Let's see, August 7th is a Thursday, and I do have the right, I do have the correct August 7th date, correct, Kelly?
Correct. Yep, August 7th.
That's the
Yes.
last date.
Yes.
So yeah, August 7th is a Thursday.
Well,
Yeah, that's correct.
the 5th would be a Tuesday, which is our normal meeting day. Open for comment. Any suggestions from the,
Would that be enough time?
The
Process
5th
of
would,
comments?
I think the 5th would be challenging for us because we have public hearings that day, both in the morning and the evening in Burns.
Oh, for you guys to be able to present, good, thank you,
Yeah.
Kelly, bring that up, yeah, and that was the 4th and the 5th, you said?
Yep.
Yeah, so how about the Tuesday before that, July 29th?
I think that's doable from
Yeah,
my
that's doable. Yep.
perspective.
I'd have to do virtual, but I can make it virtual.
so July what?
That was the 29th. We could, I mean, we can keep looking back, that would be.
I'm the 22nd works for that. But you don't have to reschedule for one person. Who knows, but everyone else is not here.
Yeah,
Schedule.
that's true, yeah.
So recommendations here, what's,
Send out a pool of,
You want me to send it out, yeah. So shall I send out available Tuesdays, 9 to noon?
yeah,
why not?
I'm flexible with
Yeah.
Monday and Thursday, but yes, Tuesdays is fine with me.
Shall I send out the poll for Wednesday, Thursdays as well?
yeah, whatever day.
Okay.
Send out to me.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 9 to noon. I will send out one of those online, whichever one is our
Yeah.
most useful one, yeah, sorry about the junk on sides. Noon, okay. Sounds great, I'm happy to do that. See what we can get from most folks.
Okay, so we'll move forward with another meeting to be able to determine our recommendations to the commission.
Okay,
And you're gonna send us information?
yes, and I will send
Specific to
you,
us?
so what I've got, what I'm planning to get is today, I will send the Secretary of State filing. And that has the actual rule language and track changes and all the fiscal and other impact statements included in that. I'll send out the staff report to the commission. So Tim had noted some figures in his presentation, some of the maps we saw, that's in the staff report, and it basically has a more general description of what you heard today, but written down. And I'll send you the 512 rulemaking webpage, which has everything we've done with respect to the rulemaking, all the RAC meetings and the materials made for that. So that will be probably more information than anybody has time to go through, but I'll make sure that it's there as a reference. And then I'm gonna follow up. We'll get our meeting summary put together quick. That'll have a link to the YouTube recording we're making now, and that's mostly for the folks that weren't able to be here today so that they can review what you folks saw today and get up to speed so that when we meet in July or August, they have this background as well as the new stuff. And then the presentation slides from today will be on the website for the commission after Jason, Tim, Kelly present to the commission. So that'll be next week, and I'll get both the minutes with YouTube and the actual slide deck links out to you in this update. So anything else that doesn't cover? Okay. Perfect.
So I guess we'll move on to public comment.
Okay. Thanks, 512 folks, appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate all your information today.
So
Yep.
we
Thank you.
don't have any members of the public in the room. And we also don't have any that are online, so.
Oh,
I
do
know
you have
that,
anything else for us today?
I don't have anything else. I know that Eric had some questions about legislative update. I don't know if you wanna.
Yeah, I guess part of my understanding of the GWAC is, you know, not only do we discuss the rules like the Harney, but also legislative things. And this year has been one of the most grueling legislative sessions with regards to water that we have seen in many years. There are so many bills that are in process right now. Some of them department sponsored, some of them are being pushed by the governor that have huge impact. And I guess my concern is we meet 3 times or 4 times a year. You know, every single meeting would be nice to have some legislative updates on what's going on, where we're at, what kind of feedback, because the department is sitting in, I've also been down doing testimony, and the department's in the room to giving testimony, giving you know, their part on even bills that they aren't necessarily pushing, like the fee bills, et cetera. But I mean, I think we're tracking you know, 50 different bills, and at least 20 of them are related to water rights. Access to private property in order to check, you know, wells, and there's just a whole host. It's ever changing, it's ever moving, nothing's set in stone, but I would, as a committee, we're supposed to give recommendations to the commission. I don't understand the process of the department, you know, put something out. Do you talk to the commission first before you start enacting legislation, or does the commission actually direct the water resource department to put in legislation that gets voted on? So nothing gets created without the commission actually prompting it, or does the department have the ability to put legislation in process? And how does the GWAC advise the commission on stuff that they're asking for? It's very convoluted, and the political process is already extremely convoluted with the amendments and the dash amendments and everything that goes
And
on.
committee assignments and.
Oh, yes, and you know, going through ways and means and what all that, I just more of, you know, the department's got bills out there, fees are one of them. But there's a whole host of other things that, related to aquifers and there's HB 2988, there's HB 2165, 2168.
3419.
Yes, Senate bill, there's a couple Senate bills out there that we're watching that are just, have drastic impact on water rights and groundwater usage in the state. And I would like to be talking about those.
I agree, 100%. Yes.
So, Eric, it's kind enough to give me a heads up early, so I'm prepared for some of these questions, but I can't answer, unfortunately, all of them. So wanted to start out, first of all, just with, what's the, first question, what's the committee's role in legislation? I don't believe that this groundwater advisory committee, this is a body that's convened by the commission. So we are here to give advice to the commission, not to legislators or the governor or what have you. So just a quick review. I wanted to put up the website first for the Groundwater Advisory Committee just to show where this is located. We've got our authorities on the right bar, so we've got the statute here. It's gonna be too small, of course. So let's see. So we're here at 536-390, and this is, here's what the Groundwater Advisory Committee, as a reminder, is charged with, right? So the commission shall appoint a committee to advise the commission on all matters related to rules for development. So that's what we're doing with the 512 rules. The Division 10 that created the critical area process under the new legislation, the groundwater allocation, that type of thing. That's, I think, what we spend most of our time on here as a committee. There's licensing of well constructors, including examinations. So Prosperit is online and generally attends these meetings. If there are changes to, well construction rules kind of fits into A, but if there's changes to the licensing, to the testing process, then we come to the Groundwater Advisory Committee and get input on that. And then this last third item is review the proposed expenditure of all revenues generated under, gives another reference, that's the start card fee part of the statute. So we have our, we include with the start card, the domestic well registration fee and the geotech fee as well, and we give update to this group every year on that. So we did that in March, right? And basically lay out what the rules are for how we expend that and show how we're expending that and take input from the committee at that time. So with respect to legislation, we don't have a statutory charge to do something there. And honestly, the commission also does not have, as far as I know, and here's where I get, but I want to say tentative and subject to revision by Brent Hudson, our legislative coordinator, or others. But as I understand it, our commission doesn't interact directly very much on the legislative front. So that's the governor's office and the natural resources group triggers down to our director's office and our policy people, and they work and in some cases with bills that the governor's supporting. As Eric said, we give testimony on bills that the legislators bring forward, and then we have some policy option packages. I guess that gets wrapped into the governor's recommended budget. I suspect that our policy option packages might have some interaction with the commission that way, but it's I haven't observed it being a direct link from the commission to the legislative process. So
if you go back to the main website or the committee, second paragraph.
Yep.
Probably need to make some edits there because it
Oh,
says advise the commission on all matters related to rule, legislation and public policy for development.
yeah, thank you. I appreciate
So I
that.
don't know if there's something in some rules that.
That's a really
is
good,
statutory, but
That's a really good point. Yeah.
And so it started to be down this rabbit hole.
Yeah, no, thank you. There it is. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I'll go back and review that and I'll take a look at the administrative rule as well and see what might have been in there. So that said, we did discuss, we do have legislative updates, right? So Bryn was here at the beginning of the session in March and gave a kind of a preview of what's up there. We talked about her coming back today with an update, but so many of the groundwater related bills are still in flux. We're at a point where we can say, well, here's where it's at in the, fifth amendment set to the rule, and amendments are still actively occurring and nothing's final until the governor signs it. So made the executive decision to hold off until after the session and give a comprehensive assessment of what actually occurred, right? Since this committee, by statute, we didn't think had a link to provide input to the legislators on what's happening, we figured we'd let that fall out and give you what the final results are. So we are planning to do that. That said, because Eric asked, and thank you for that, Bryn did give me a quick legislative update email, and I don't know, it's, I'm just gonna read it off here. So summary of what's happening is the session has about 3 weeks or less left. Eric said he's been tracking a number of bills. Our tracking queue is down to about 400 bills, and those have some relating to clause that could be water. So that's not all, there's not 400 groundwater bills, but there's 400 bills that might affect what we do. So we're still tracking 400 active ones. Our budget hasn't been passed yet, but there is a joint natural resources subcommittee meeting today at 3 p.m. with a work session apparently for our budget. So that's happening this afternoon. There have been several bills that have moved through the legislative process, but I don't believe some of them maybe have been signed, some of them have not. So there's a bill about climate temporary transfers and leases and the sunset date that's apparently been passed and signed. I couldn't tell you exactly the details of that, but that's House Bill 2801.
Yeah, 2801.
There's House Bill 3342, which is a water right transaction process improvements that's gone through the legislative process that needs the governor's signature. Then that'll have a small groundwater impact that we can separate out and bring to you at a future quarterly meeting. There is House Bill 3364, FSG, and the other acronym is Water Project Grants and Loans Program, I believe, improvements to that. That has been through the process, and it sounds like it has governor's signature. House Bill 3372, which is a bill about exempt wells and expanding exemptions for a half acre of commercial garden irrigation. So,
And 4,000 gallons a day of usage.
yep, correct. That has been through the legislative process, but needs the governor's signature. So I'll just expand on that a little bit because it's of interest here. We have these exempt groundwater uses, right? And there's always been this contention where there's an exempt use, well, where irrigation is a permitted use in any size, or has been historically, with some minor exceptions for schoolyards and what have you. In our regulation of people using water without a permit or license, we have not looked at area necessarily. So I can't remember, it was last year, 2023, we regulated about 20 illegal users in the southern Willamette Valley. A handful of those were relatively small farm market folks, and that really got people's attention. So this is partially a fix for that type of thing. Also, groups were getting funds to start up farmers markets for local food sources in rural communities. But then they didn't have farmers to stock the farmers markets because they couldn't get a water right to do so. And once they started selling at a farmers market, that came outside of the irrigation exemption.
Well,
So
there are people like me that claim that the 5,000 gallon exemption for exempt wells should allow me to irrigate with drip irrigation up to 5,000 gallons a day on my filter brush.
which we just,
Because it's a
which the department's heretofore disagreed with, but given the governor's signature. So,
Is it an area or volume?
I half acre and 4,000 gallons.
But I think they,
Or 3,000
I think
gallons per
they
day.
kicked it up to 3/4 of an acre for the,
Oh, really? Okay,
from the half to
okay,
3/4, but they cut it down to 4,000 gallons a day instead of 5.
so. We'll get the details for you in our update and, and then, last one that's moved through the process, Senate Bill 761, which is a Walla Walla Irrigation District split in-stream leasing bill. I don't know that that has a groundwater impact other than perhaps supplemental rights that may be affected based on how the surface water, deliveries go. Other topics that are still live and, being, edited or amended. House Bill 3806 is a Deschutes water banking bill. That'll definitely have a groundwater component or impact to it. There's Senate Bill 1153, transfer review that takes into account native migratory fish habitat impacts. That has a groundwater component to the transfer.
Yeah, that one is, it's not allowing transfers. So your well essentially is failing, you need to move it. And if it's gonna impact an aquatic
Oh,
sensitive, we could have an issue. Would not get that transfer on a well you already have because of an aquatic species in a stream. So there's some serious impacts there for the existing wells.
yeah. Well, let's see. I was just told that Bryn Hudson was able to join online, and as long as Bryn's here, I don't know that I need to keep following through this when we've got the expert. Are you available, Bryn, to run us through the rest of these?
I am walking out the door to drive down to Salem right now, so I can give a high level overview with no paper in front of me, which is totally fine. But I was listening in, and the conversation was a little more lively than I was expecting, so I figured I'd just hop on. So there was a little bit of gap in the conversation that I did miss when I was transitioning from YouTube to Zoom. But I did want to, Justin, did you talk about our fees? Because I think that one is a big one that folks are likely curious about.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to the fees yet, so.
Okay, cool. So, Justin already highlighted some of the bills that have more or less moved through the process. Obviously, everything needs to be signed by the governor before it becomes permanent. So unless she decides to veto a bill, which we haven't seen on anything water related yet, so that hasn't been a relevant factor. So I give this update with the big if, that if it hasn't gotten a signature from the governor, it is not a done deal at this point in time. So the one thing that I will highlight on our fees, so as Justin mentioned, we have our budget hearing today in front of the Joint Ways and Means Subcommittee. So it starts in a subcommittee and it needs to go to the full Ways and Means Committee and then both floors of the chamber to be voted on, of each chamber. So there's still quite a bit of steps in the process. However, getting a work session to move the budget out of the subcommittee is a big step. We are the final natural resource agency, save the best for last, right? To get a work session. So that will be today at 3. Those of you who are interested in listening in, you can stream that on OLIS, and I can give Justin a link if folks want to listen in. So for the most part, as a reminder, the governor's recommended budget, which I did go through with you all about 3 months ago, is the starting point for negotiations with the legislature. And then ultimately the legislature and the subcommittee members have to decide how they are going to balance the budget and build it in consort with other priorities, other asks, other things that they would like to see in the budget. So the budget materials did just get posted. So we are currently going through and evaluating what is in that recommendation that is going in front of the committee today. So this is all very hot off the press preliminary stuff. We will be giving a more comprehensive update to the commission on Thursday. Once we've had a little more time to kind of dig into what's actually in the budget proposal and then based on what happens today in hearing. But I think the big thing that everyone wants to know about is our fees. So the department has 2 fee bills. And how fees essentially work with WRD is because we have fees in statute. We have to have a budget package that carries the revenue, and then we have to have a bill that changes the actual fees that are set in statute. So we often have what we call companion bills and companion policy option packages. So the first one I'll highlight is the well construction kind of package fees. And so that was a bill 2808 that sought a 40% increase in start cards, and then a 10% generally increase in well constructor permit and licensing fees. So that's the exam fee, the license and renewal fee, landowner permit fee, continuing education credit fee. And those are slated for about a 10% across the board increase. So the decision was made by the committee based on the documentation that we can see on OLIS that they are going to be moving forward with those fee increases. So that bill has also been posted for a work session today as well to move with our budget. So it is looking like the committee is going to recommend that 40% and 10% increase to the start card and well construction fees, well construction licensing fees subsequently. And then the other fees were in 2803, House Bill 2803. And those are the water right transaction and dam safety annual fees. And so that had a 56% fee increase for the dam safety annual fees, and then a proposed 135% for the water right transaction fees, which we I know some of you had the joy of sitting on, I think, upwards of 10 work groups talking about all of these different fees, and know that this was a really difficult conversation and not a decision that we took lightly. So the recommendations and the paperwork that we are looking at also shows that the committee is going to be recommending the 56% fee increase for dam safety annual fees, and then a 50% increase for the water right transaction fees. So that's down from the original 135%. And then they are going to backfill the remaining revenue gap with permanent general fund. So as a reminder, all of these fee increases do not add capacity. They are to maintain existing staffing capacity. And so if you don't increase the fees or backfill it with general fund, you have to find revenue elsewhere or reduce positions. So what the committee has decided to do is reduce that 135% fee increase to a 50% fee increase, and then backfill with about 1.3 million in permanent general fund, so that we're not going to have to do any reductions associated with the water right transactions program. So I know that those were some big areas of conversation that some of you even participated in. So that is what we anticipate the committee will be voting on and having discussions about today at the work session. In terms of other bills that are still in play that are not WRD budget related, specifically being run by the department, the Harney CREP bill, which is I think it's House Bill 2813, that was a bill that was attempting to make some technical fixes to the way that CREP was set up. The initial drafting of the policy option package and the bill, we did not do it correctly. It was kind of a complicated route that we had to go to actually get it introduced. And all said and done, there was some miscommunication about what we needed to do technically. And the way that it was drafted put the original base appropriation of $500,000 for Harney Crep at risk. And we have made the decision that we would like to not put that money at risk. We want to keep that money regardless of what happens to it at the end of the biennium. And so we're not going to be moving forward with that legislation, but we are going to regroup and then evaluate how we can do it correctly next time. And we'll take another run at it at a later date. But that one was one that we just really wanted to be sure that we weren't putting those funds that were in our base budget for the water users in Harney. We did not want to put those funds at risk with the way that the legislation and the package were drafted. So you're not going to see that bill and that package moving forward. Other legislation that is not WRD legislation, 3544, House Bill 3544 also has a work session today in the Joint Ways and Means Subcommittee. That is essentially a companion piece of legislation to the bill that Justin already highlighted, 3342. So there is a 3342 was kind of a water right transaction process modernization package. 3544 is kind of a mirror piece of legislation with the contested case process. So these two bills are really looking at streamlining, removing administrative barriers, trying to get the same work done quicker and more transparently. So that bill has a work session up today as well with our budget. So the committee will also be discussing that one. And then the two governor's bills, which are still in, there's still a lot of moving pieces with those, is 1153 and 1154. 1153 is the transfers bill that puts restrictions on certain types of transfers. The bill kind of specifies 3 different scenarios in which this review would apply. That kind of triggers a 2-part review for impacts of flow reductions on migratory native fish habitat. So those are, and then the 1154 is a groundwater quality management bill that is really kind of an interagency strategy around how, as a state, we respond to and address groundwater quality issues in the state. So 1153 just passed out of the Senate Rules Committee yesterday, I believe, with amendments. And that is headed to Ways and Means. So that will go to a subcommittee. It will need to get a work session in a subcommittee, and then it will need to go to the full Ways and Means Committee before it gets voted on the Senate and House floors. And then 1154, which is the groundwater quality one, has a work session today at 1 o'clock, I believe, in Senate Rules. And there are amendments, A3 amendments that are on the table for adoption. And so at this point in time, it is not clear to me where that bill is going to go. If it is amended and adopted and passed out of the Rules Committee, it's not clear at this point in time where the bill is going to be referred. Because it's a Senate bill, if it doesn't go to Ways and Means, it has to go over to the House to be voted on in a policy committee and then goes to the floor. But if it goes to Ways and Means, then it moves through the Ways and Means process and then goes to both chambers for a vote. So there's kind of a couple different avenues that legislation can go. And then I'm just kind of trying to do my mental note. Sorry, Justin, I don't have that list I sent you in front of me. I know there was discussion that I heard, just kind of some rumblings in the audio about the measurement and reporting bills that were introduced by Hellman Owens. I think off the top of my head, if I recall, it was 3419, and I think there was a 3343 or 3433. There's some combination of those numbers. Those bills did not make it out of policy committees by the necessary deadlines. So those bills, those specific bill numbers are not moving forward. That's not to say that the legislature couldn't do something later on with other bill vehicles. However, I am not hearing anything that indicates that they would be doing that. However, they don't take orders from me and they don't run things by me, so they can do whatever they want, really. But those specific pieces of legislation cannot move forward because they did not make it out of their necessary policy committees by the specified deadlines. So That is just to say, I know Justin said we've got less than 3 weeks to go in session. And I know that that seems like we are really, really close to the end and things are kind of getting solidified, but 3 weeks in the legislative session is months in the real world. So there is still a lot that can happen. Our governor's recommended budget and the legislatively adopted budget really won't be finalized until the end of session bill passes. That may have direct appropriations. It may have other appropriations associated with agency work in it. So we really aren't going to know the full scope of our budget until the legislature gavels out. And at that point, we are going to be developing a legislative summary. We do this every long session that kind of pulls the relevant water legislation, either for WRD. We will pull legislation that impacts some of our close sister agencies. So we often, if OWEB gets a new funding program or new money to go into an existing funding program that we think our stakeholders might be interested in, we may pull that legislation into our summary. And then we will get that distributed so that folks can kind of understand the lay of the land of what happened in session, what passed, what didn't. But again, there is still quite a bit up in the air that we are waiting with bated breath to see what happens for the rest of session. They have to constitutionally finish by the 29th of June. There is a target date of the 18th to gavel out. I would be very, very surprised if they finish up by then based on how conversations have been going. So I anticipate that we will see them gavel out anytime between the 18th and the 28th or the 29th. It could go all the way to the 29th. It could be randomly 23rd, right? So we're just kind of watching and waiting and responding as needed. But today is going to be a big day to get our budget out of the subcommittee and worked through the process. It's exciting that we are seeing movement there. But that is why I am not in the building. I've been doing prep this morning and I'm on my way down to be in the room to answer any questions. So with that, if folks do have any questions, I am happy to answer them. Again, I am driving, so I have limited, unfortunately, you're limited to what's in my brain at this point in time.
That's an excellent update. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Brent.
Yep, and you went through all the bullets that I had, so I think that was also
Good job.
complete for groundwater, yeah. Good brain, so.
Thanks for bringing that up, Brent. Important.
So,
At 1154 is one that's the governor's able to do groundwater quality areas, which impacts a lot. And DEQ can get involved and water resources involved and OHA is involved and doing
You mean
something like-
everybody in the water?
They can essentially, like, you know, the Umatilla Basin, you know, has PFAS and other concerns, and they can pick an area and the governor could essentially dictate that these agencies need to go ahead and make this area a groundwater concern area, and it drastically impacts with the rules. So it's a lot of very interesting and scary stuff going on, so. Thank you for your time talking about it.
Yeah.
Any other subjects somebody wants to bring up? And seeing as how we have no general public.
Well, I did ask you last time, we were about the responsibility for the water rights and the dams.
yes, I passed that on to our region manager. I don't have any specific updates on dams for the groundwater advisory committee. I did pass on your concerns to Tom, so. I'm happy to talk with you afterwards about it.
Okay.
About a dam one.
Anything else? I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh, you guys make a motion?
Motion, second.
There you go. I'll second.
Again, by acclamation.
Yeah.
And thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I really appreciate meeting face to face.